Top of it to you. I gotta tell you, there's so much great information in this. I'm trying to tell you, save this to your device. Make sure you send this and share this to your family. And please, please let this inspire you to reclaim your ancient, rich, and powerful ancestry. Stop waiting on the world to change. We got to change it. For far too long, we let other people tell our story. It's imperative that we reclaim our heritage and that we tell our ancestors' story. Because I can't tell you the importance of that. It gets so frustrating when you are doing your genealogy or you are watching other people's videos in regards to your family's history, and there's a certain narrative that's driven that does not coincide with the legwork and the research. And you're going to find that within this video. So thank you so much, and I look forward to sharing this with you. This slide shows my direct maternal line, the mitochondrial line, and this is the line that determines tribal identity in the Albemarle region. Every woman in the sequence carried and passed on the same indigenous ancestry, unchanged all the way down to me. Woohoo! So I listed the tribes. And if you notice, it says no Tuscarora, no Croatan, no Lumbee, and no outside tribes. Okay? I'm going to play this video.
And I would like to give you a brief introduction to the enslaved community at Somerset, as well as some of the primary source material that we use to help understand the lives of those enslaved persons. First, I would like to mention that in our interpretation at Somerset, we seek to engage our visitors in a conversation about the power structure that dictated the lives of enslaved black workers. Slavery was based on racism. It thrived on violence, fear, and the constant threat of family separation. But we also focus on how individual enslaved Africans and African Americans survived and negotiated their lives within the system of bondage. The history of the enslaved community here at Somerset began in 1785 when the Lake Company, which was a partnership between Josiah Collins I, Nathaniel Allen, and Samuel Dickinson, began acquiring enslaved workers locally, in addition to 78 enslaved Africans imported directly from the west coast of Africa in 1786. We do not have a comprehensive list of those enslaved Africans, but have identified by name a total of 15 individuals from later records. These people include a woman identified as Donkey, which was an anglicized nickname for Duco, a name which translates to 11th born in the Akan languages of West Africa.
Now, before we go further, I wanted you to see those names. You saw how I said Rachel and Bridget? They're part of my ancestry, okay? And here it is. They're in this plantation on this inventory list. Please pay attention to Rachel and Bridget because we're going to talk about them a little later in the video.
We have no evidence as to where Duco came from specifically or the life she was forced to leave behind in her homeland. The structure in which we are filming is a reproduction of the four-family dormitory-style houses in which enslaved Africans like Duco would have lived. I would like to turn your attention to the 1843 list of families reproduced for this exhibit on the wall.
Also, that name is Mahala. So we have Rachel, Bridget, and Mahala. These three women are part of my ancestors. Just remember their names.
Some earlier lists, such as the 1819 probate inventory from Josiah I's estate, only contain names and ages, while others indicate family groups, as in the 1839 list compiled after the death of Josiah II.
Okay, I cut it there because it was just more and more. But if you want to see the full video, feel free. I put the link down there, or not the link because you ain't going to be able to click on it, but I have the full uh, link written out. Anyway, uh, over to your right, you're going to see this is notes from my ancestor, Dorothy Sproul Redford. Okay. She started her journey in looking up the family history and genealogy in 1983. And at the time she was doing it, of course, she had to put in that legwork and she had to go to the record offices and things of that nature. So she had to really, you know, put it, she wasn't as spoiled as I am, where I could just, access digital databases here and there. I still say put in the legwork work if you can. Like, it's important. But I'm going to read this relatively quickly. This is notes, and I know that there's misnomers and myths that say that we don't have oral tradition. But yes, we were Indians and indigenous. We do have oral tradition. Um, but anyway, let's get it. It says, when I began documenting the family histories of Somerset Place descendants in 1983, a smattering of the families I interviewed said that some of their ancestors were Indians. They included the Terrell County, North Carolina descendants of Reverend John Turner Hill and Daisy Sawyer Hill. The family's documented maternal lineage extends back 5 generations from Daisy Sawyer Hill to Kofi and Sally, 2 enslaved laborers brought directly from West Africa to Somerset Place Plantation in 1786. But, based on what their ancestors told them, the descendants were positive their paternal Dempsey and Hill ancestors were, quote, pure blooded, unquote, Indians. As the Somerset Place genealogical study progressed, the number of individuals claiming Indian ancestry mounted, as did the difficulty in verifying these claims. No Indians were identified on the Tyrrell County censuses taken between 1790 and 1920. And again, I'm going to repeat that. No Indians were identified on Tyrrell County's censuses taken between 1790 and 1920. The word Indian was also absent from the Terrell County Court minutes, property deeds, wills, and marriage records. All of the public records before slavery ended identified free, non white residents of the county as free colored or mulatto. 2 exceptions were found in the Terrell County Court minutes where people were listed as free Negro. Fortunately, 2 elder gentlemen I interviewed, Mr. Cadwell Bowser and Mr. Alric A. Hill, told easily verifiable stories about their Indian ancestors. Mr. Cadwell, Cad Bowser's grandfather, James Bowser, told him that his ancestors were never slaves. They were Indian fishermen who came across the Alligator River from present day Roanoke Island and settled permanently in the Terrell County community called Alligator. Once there, they continued to earn a comfortable living fishing in surrounding waters. The 1850 and 1860 census records, which only named free residents of Terrell County, listed his ancestors as Alligator Township mulatto fishermen. Other households identified on the census as mulattoes included the Bryants, Dempsey, Rosems, and Hill families. When the Bowser names were located in the Terrell County Clerk of Court records, they were again identified as free colored or mulatto. Their names included in the court records revealed the children were apprenticed out. Yes, they had apprenticeships. They were apprenticed out to serve local whites. The apprentice children worked from 1 to 20 years and ranged in age from 1 year to 17 years of age. Yes, I came across this book, Somerset Homecoming, Recovering a Lost Heritage, and it was written by Dorothy Sproul Redford, the same Dorothy Sproul Redford who left the notes and was doing a genealogy early on in 1983. Um, Now, when I found this, I was shocked. Shocked in a sense that it seems like there was a little, I don't know, partnership or some sort of collaboration with Alex Haley. Um, as you see, there's a quote from Alex Haley on this back of this cover. Now, I know I'm still, a little shook by it because it supports a narrative in which, the notes that she previously held um, we're talking about how even though, she interviewed these folks, they said they weren't enslaved, and here it is, you know, um, this book's out and Alex Haley's name's on here, and you know what he. And if you know anything about Alex Haley, he was sued for plagiarism, as well as Roots. People thought it was real, but it's really not. It's fictitious. It's a fictitious uh, story. It's a story. Now, I'm not going to say, I'm not one of those folks that are saying that slavery did not take place. I'm just aware that it took place with the copper colored people of America, first. And we'll get into all that. But I just wanted to show you, again, I'm not condemning my ancestor for the choices in which she made. I found that she also became the site manager there at Somerset Place Plantation. So again, this is the type of things you got to listen. You got to be able to take it all in. But yeah, so she did well for herself, and we'll get into this a little later. So back to that video that I played from Somerset. Remember those names? Bridget, Rachel, and Mahala? Well, again, they are my ancestors, and I'm showing you a little snippet and clip, and I'm sorry if it's cut off a little bit, but I'm gonna see if I could work that out by the time I show this video. But anywho, uh, Mahala Bryant Tarkenton, they wrote this about her. Thing is, though, they say she was married to James Tarkenton, and that is not accurate. Mahala Sproul was actually married to James Tarkington, and Mahala Bryan Tarkington was married to Moses Tarkington. And Mahala Bryan is the ancestor in which I'm speaking of, um, with Mother Rachel and Grandmother Bridget. Taken from the nativeheritageproject.com website in regards to William Taylor. But a statement was made relative to the Bryan family, in which I'd like you to witness. This statement is, quote, "It appears that the Bryan family had Tuscarora blood," unquote. Many content creators before me had done an excellent job explaining the many labels and false classifications of the America's copper-colored people. So I will not delve into it too far, but please note, white was also a classification given to many melanated individuals as well, and considered to be an upgraded status. I do not believe that the copper-colored people ever imagined that they would have their ethnic background eradicated in the future once they undertook the quote white unquote classification, nor did they believe the free colored classification would have them remembered as quote African unquote American either. The term mulatto was not as we know it to be today. Many mulattoes were completely melanated, meaning both mother and father swarthy or tawny, and yes, there was descriptions of dark mulattoes. And please research this topic for yourself. What you see before you is an excerpt from the website eastcarolinaroots.com and the relationship of Bridget Bryant and Cyprian, I'm sorry, I done tore his name up, Cyprian Goodman, showing their daughter Rachel. Bridget, a well-known member of the Bryan family, was documented on the 1790 census for Tyrrell County, North Carolina. It is eyebrow-raising that her Indian tribe information was ignored, and she was simply referred to as a free-colored, with absolutely no affiliation to her actual tribe. I've noticed that North Carolina chose to acknowledge the Pierce family and Simpson family, as there are documentaries and many interviews available. However, the Bryans, Rossums, and Hill families have very few stories told And or perhaps I have not found them yet. If you know of some resources, please feel free to put them in the comments. Yes, Bridget is noted on the actual 1790 census for North Carolina. Here is the census. And please bear with me as I intend to get better with presentational skills. However, I am just showing you the actual North Carolina census record of 1790. There is this section that can be found at the second name column. So it's like the column with the names, like all the names. Just look at the second column with the names in it, and you'll see it at the bottom of the screen. Okay, Bridget is noted along with others as the free colored, I guess. I don't know. Yes, that was a lot to take in, but that was early on. And again, I repeat, I am not a professional. I'm just like you know what I mean? But I am sharing my videos, I'm sharing my information doing videos. So you're going to get a lot of bloopers probably in this video, but it's okay. Um, so I just want to state something. With the tribes that I am a part of, that my ancestral lines are part of, it's not that we didn't meet federal criteria. The criteria was designed against us. Sum it all up in a nutshell. So, just so you know, federal recognition requires treaties, reservations, and federal supervision. But the Albemarle tribes, we weren't given reservations. We were never placed under federal supervision, and we were never given treaties, and we were never placed on federal rolls. If you recall, you saw the 1790 census, and all they did was put free colored on there. And even though they knew that these people had tribal affiliations, they erased them. Okay, to sum it all up in a nutshell. It says, but the criteria was built for Western reservation tribes, not Eastern family-based nations like mine. You know what I'm saying? So that happens a lot, and I just want to show you this as we go forward. So this is Mahala and one of her daughters. Okay, so this is the picture they were speaking of. Somerset Place had up. And yes, that's Mahala Bryant that was married to Moses. And I want to show you the timeline of the Indian rolls and exclusion factors. Okay, so here you have it. They had an annuity roll, right, around 1790s through the 1900s, and then they had removal rolls. Okay, 1830s to 1850s. They had the Dolls roll. That one's quite popular from 1898 to 1914. Mind you, my great grandfather was born 1914. Uh, what's this? The Guion, I'm probably gonna mess that up. Miller roll, and then they had the Baker roll. I heard of that one before too, and the Indian census rolls. So just take a gander. It says the purpose, you know what I'm saying, to distribute treaty payments, right? That means if you got in a treaty. But like I stated before, the Albemarle tribes weren't given that. They knew who we were, and they basically erased our ancestry by calling us and reclassifying us as free people of color. And again, some people, some ancestors, were labeled white. Some ancestors were labeled non-white, some colored, mulatto, all those wonderful labels, which we know are not wonderful. I don't know why I say that. I don't know why I do that, but I do. Anywho, um, so let's get it. It says early census takers counted many indigenous and mixed ancestry families as white, and that's what I stated a little earlier. So in the 1700s and early 1800s, white simply meant free, non enslaved, or non African. Okay, that's very important to understand. Indigenous people living off reservations were often counted as white, indeed. Iberian complexioned Europeans, yes, tawny, olive, brown, swarthy, were counted as white. Coastal mixed families, Tuscarora, Socoton, Croatan, were counted as white. Clerks had no Indian Do you get this? They didn't have any Indian category in many years, so they defaulted it to white. So it's telling me this is why your early ancestors, the Johnsons, the Bryants, the Bowsers, the Hills, the Tarkingtons, the Sykes, the Baileys, the McLeese, Perkins, and Livermans, they appeared as white in early records, okay? And it was no reflection of complexion. It was based on status, okay? Now, as you see, right, we were not able to get on any rolls. They already knew who we were. They erased us in regards to documenting us. They didn't give us any treaties or anything like that. And I just want to show you. So, even though I'm an Indian, indigenous on the coastal region, you know what I'm saying, of North Carolina, uh, I would not probably get a Lumbee tribal in recognition, right? And I don't know. Maybe I never tried, to tell you the truth. I probably could, but at the same time, you know. Okay, so it says one must prove biological descent from an individual listed on one of the following Lumbee based rolls. Now they have a Lumbee based roll. So it's a 1900, 1910, and 1920. Okay, and it says that they have to identify the person as Indian. Now, as you know, there's a lot of controversy in regards to that. All right. So I'm just showing you the different censuses in which that had to take place. And as you see, it's all in the 19 what 35 through 1950. So and you know they were still not letting us know who we were. They were still reclassifying us and things of that nature at this particular time. So it says why my maternal line will never be recognized. I'm laughing it, but at first it kind of, you know, it's upsetting, but uh, it doesn't stop people from being who they are. You get what I'm saying? So, the Albemarle tribe, Sokotan, Machapunga, and European were never federally recognized. We weren't. So our descendants, we can't meet the criteria. They locked us out. Colonial and state governments erased indigenous identity by reclassifying us as free colored, destroying the documentation the government now demands. Isn't that something? Their demand is something that we can't give them, and they know we can't because anyway. Albemarle tribes were family based nations. Yes, we were family based nations. You'll find out about kinships. When you start doing genealogy, they'll have kinships, you know what I'm saying? And that just shows that it was like family based nations. We weren't reservation tribes. So they say that locks us out of that continuous political structure. But truth be told, our line continued regardless of what the government allowed or not. They couldn't dismantle families. You get what I'm saying? Although they tried. But anyway, Croton was a state created label, not a federal recognized tribe, and its identity was repeatedly renamed and redefined by the state. Yes, so it gets a little political. North Carolina Tuscarora groups cannot meet federal requirements because only the New York Tuscarora are recognized. North Carolina communities were classified as remnant groups after removal. Now, they also are referred to as Tuscarora refugees if you are Tuscaroran and still in North Carolina. And that's because they would not allow uh, you to join the New York Tuscaroras. There's only certain ones that can do such. And if I may, the New York Tuscarora fasten actually speaks Iroquois. They originated in North Carolina, where it's Algonquian language. And in further research, I found that the Iroquois and then the Algonquian really didn't, they were beefing. So, a lot of the refugees wouldn't go north. for that particular reason. Um, so anyway, lack of recognition reflects government policy. You see what I'm saying? It's government policy. It doesn't negate ancestry and legitimacy. So it says the core issue: the U.S. government does not recognize Tuscarora descendants in North Carolina. So even though the Tuscarora Nation originated in North Carolina, the federal government only recognizes the Tuscarora who migrated to New York after the Tuscarora Wars from 1711 to 1715, or joined the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, remained under Iroquois governance. See, and that again, that's not something many of us would do, if you know what I mean. But anyway, the U.S. does not recognize, again, Tuscarora who stayed in North Carolina, Tuscarora who merged with other coastal tribes, Tuscarora who became free people of color. How do you? They did that anyway. Tuscarora who appeared in Albemarle records, and Tuscarora descendants living in North Carolina today. Now, if you appeared in Albemarle records, they knew that most of the Albemarle Indians, they knew who we were. We were the ones that they met when they came here and colonized and settled with. However, this is clear evidence that the government locked them out, locked us out. And it's the root problem. Okay, confirmation, affirmation. Um, so it says you cannot claim federally recognized tribal status because your tribes were erased before federal recognition even existed. This is an important key. So my people, the Machupunga, Sokotan, Yupin, Croatan, Tuscarora refugee communities, once again, they were never given treaties. They were never placed on reservations. They were never enrolled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And we were reclassified as free people of color, mulatto or colored, Negro, and all those other things, absorbed into census categories that erased our indigenous identity. And again, by the time the federal government started recognizing tribes, my tribe, it's already been legislated out of existence on paper. They already got us. So ancestors didn't disappear. When you look at the records and you look into history, they always like to say that we're extinct, right? That they got us or all of them moved somewhere. You know how that goes. That's not the truth. So I just want to give you an idea, right? Knowing what you know, knowing that there are copper colored people that are indigenous, and remember the separation between, bathrooms and things like that, and it colored. Okay, come on now. We got to start putting one and two together. But anywho, it says 1760 to 1830s. They had a regulator and vigilante violence. Now we know what that is. That's very well put. Regulator and vigilante violence. And I'm just giving ideas, right? I'm just showing you what took place. 1820 to 1860, there was I'm having a problem. Anti-abolitionist and anti-indigenous hostility. So indigenous families, we were monitored, questioned, and sometimes threatened. Listen, a lot of this stuff didn't change. If you look at what happened to us, it's still in effect to this day. But anywho, 1865 through 1877. Now, this Reconstruction era, okay, I want people to do your research in this because I don't remember it being taught in schools to me. However, it's very significant to our community. It's very significant to the so-called African American community. All right, even though you're not African, and that's where you have Woodrow Wilson, Birth of a Nation, and come on, you you already know the rest. But do just check out these dates. I'm not gonna go through them all. You feel me? I got them here for you, so you can screenshot, take a picture, and just see how it goes. But I just want you to know um, these particular events took place for a reason. Okay, and there's one I want to point out too. 1898, the white, uh, you know, supremacy campaign, that the Wilmington coup, right? That was the most successful coup. If you don't know about this, please look into it. It gives you a lot of context on why these folks or why my ancestors were unable to get federal recognition, and some of the suppression mechanisms on why they wouldn't shout it from the hilltops of who they were. I also want to take a look at this because, as you know, or maybe you don't, if you're familiar with me, you know that I host channels. I speak on narcissism, spiritual narcissism, and I just wanted to kind of bridge the gap in what has happened to my ancestors, what's happening to current descendants to this day, um, and just give you a different perspective, right? So, in regards to misclassification and erasure, right? That's gaslighting because it's denying a reality, it's forcing others to doubt their truth. The victim blaming, right? There's projection and shifting blame onto the victim, right? This sound familiar? Triangulation, narcissistic manipulation, pitting groups against each other to maintain control. Sound familiar? Remember the campaigns to stop Asian hate? Remember with this I don't know, deportation that's going on. I'm trying not to say keywords, but it had the Latino community, what I'm saying, feeling a certain type of way. It's a lot of groups that all of a sudden get triangulated against us through the media for whatever reasons. So just think about that. Adultification of children. Now, this is something that bothered many of us when you're watching the media, because what they do is they'll make, even though it'll be a minor, they'll make the minor seem like a grown individual, like someone who's an adult, right? And I don't know if they're doing that so much anymore, but I know it was really prevalent back in the day, in the 90s. I say that's not back in the day, but in the 90s and even earlier. It says dehumanization, stripping innocence, and treating children as threats. hmm And you know what? That still happens. I'm not gonna front. It still happens. Salary disparities and appraisal biases. That still happens. Exploitation, using power to strip resources. Okay. False, unaliving rulings. Right. How many times have you heard of a young man or something like that, becoming strange fruit, and they say that he did it on his own recognizance. hmm and civil lawsuits instead of criminal accountability. And I'm just going to say Ben Crump, right? You've seen him so many times. There's no criminal accountability, but yet you can come up with a civil lawsuit. That's minimization, and we all know that, and it's very, 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 very frustrating indeed. So I want to get into some of these complexion descriptors from back in the day. Okay. Um, Complexion descriptors is more like, the tawny, the swarthy, the things like that. But it's important that we touch base on that. And we will. But before we do, I want to big up Kurimeo Ahau. This man is the bee's knees. He is my go-to historian because he's not biased. He just puts the information out there. He puts his sites out there. He deals with a lot of pushback and feedback, and his heart's out there. You know what I'm saying? So much respect to him. He helped me out on my journey when I was running into um, some questions that I had in regards to just the background, the area, the people, and things like that. Prior to what my living uh, ancestors could tell me, right? So Kuri Mayo, shout out to you. He's on YouTube, he's on Instagram, and I think some others, but if you could just go to his YouTube and subscribe and everything and look at his information. Uh, he has great information. I'm gonna play this video from him, this little clip, and we'll talk about complexion descriptors shortly thereafter.
But just trying to read today on the Shabbat, if you guys don't mind, real quick. All right. Am I good? Yeah? You guys can hear me? Let me get it closer. Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah? You guys can hear me, right? You guys can hear me, right? Loud and clear, we hear you. Okay, good, good, good. Good, 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 good. So again, I warned you, right? It's gonna have some stuff here that, and again, they're mixing the Sephardic Jews with the Ashkenazi Jews and just calling everybody Jews, and they're not all the same people, right? So we've gone over that.
Remember, I asked y'all to remember the name Israel Pierce, right? That's why I wanted you to remember it for this part, so you could kind of put one and two together.
I'm gonna start in the introduction here, as you guys can see, in 1585, Joaquim Gaunes, or Gans, all right? That's where I'm gonna start. So it says, in 1585, Joaquim Gans, or Gans, landed on Roanoke Island, becoming the first known Jew, right? The first known Jew to set foot in what is today the United States. So we're gonna dodge the hijack big time right there, because this is the true old world, right? So we know that the true promised land, we know Israelites, Hebrews, and a lot of different nations from the old world were here, right? So the first Jew, maybe the first person called a Jew, maybe, yeah. We can probably agree with that. But this person in Roanoke Island, these so-called Jews in Roanoke Island, they weren't just Ashkenazi Israelis, you know, these were Sephardic Jews who colonized Roanoke and Jamestown. They were fleeing the Catholics. We got the whole drop. We got videos on this. We proved it. A lot of these Roanoke survivors, because they say they disappeared, right? They actually blended in with the American Indians, became a part of the tribes, created a lot of tribes like the Croatan, part of that, and mixing with Indians and all that. But this is very important, right? So when we're talking about Joaquim, we're talking about Portuguese or Spanish people, right? Who came in as English, Irish, French, you know. So Roanoke Island was settled by people fleeing the Catholics. If you guys didn't know, Sephardic Jews and Moors mostly. All right, so they kind of rushed over there. So we got Joaquim Gonce landed on Roanoke Island, becoming the first known Jew to set foot in what is today the United States. But he would be followed soon after by a steady stream of Jews, so-called, right, arriving in the wilds of North America, seeking their fortunes and fleeing persecution in many cases. Most would meet and many would establish relationship with Native Americans, individuals and communities across the Americas. You're still reeling from the expulsion from Spain. This is what I'm saying. Ashkenazi Jews did not get expelled from Spain. We're talking about Sephardic Jews. We're talking about people of color in general, guys. So-called black folks. These so-called Jews, 1500s. Again, they're letting you know here. They were still reeling from the expulsions from Spain and the dangers of the Inquisition from the Catholics found the New World to be fertile ground for their interests. Their interests, huh? They're the merchants who started the sugar plantations and everything. Sephardic Jews and Moors. Not the so-called white man, the boogeyman. Even though they had a lot of pale-skinned Sephardic Jews too with them. So they found fertile ground, economic and religious interest.
Yes, and I wanted to show you my Croatan ancestor, right? Well, he wasn't Croatan. However, he was on the voyage with John White, I believe it is. Yes, he served under John White, who was the governor of the settlement. When John White returned to England for supplies in late 1587, Roger Belly was one of the only six assistants who remained in the colony. White was delayed in his return for 3 years due to conflict between England and Spain, and upon his arrival in 1590, the colonists included Belly. Uh, they disappeared. And again, the lost colony of Roanoke. Um, it's very it's widely known. I would be surprised if you didn't know about it. But yes, he has Anglo Norman, and it was occupational for him to be, here. But yet he became part of the Croatan. So I said he wasn't, but he was, because he's the one that blended in. Um, Very interesting. And yes, family members carry this name to this day. The Bailey families in Terrell County and surrounding counties. So back to the complexion descriptors. I know I had that already, but complexion descriptors that match Mediterranean Europeans, okay, as well as the indigenous on the coast. That's my mom to the left, my dad to the right, and I am in the middle. I'm rather young in that picture. I'm a teenager. I'm not that anymore, but I just wanted to give you an idea of complexion descriptors and how they would be utilized. For instance, my mom would be considered tawny. My dad, he would be considered swarthy. I myself would be brown, right? Um, and these descriptors, they match Iberian Portuguese, Sephardic Jews, Greek Balkan coastal peoples, and Mediterranean mariners. Okay, and they do not match Northern European pale descriptors. And this is something that I want to point out. Given our current environment today, right, and being here in the U.S., there's much talk as if, uh, Europe didn't have any melanated people, like they couldn't be Greek or they couldn't be Iberian, Mediterranean, and all these things, or even Sephardic for that matter. That's just a misnomer that is not true in its entirety. And I think it's imperative that we all do our research and reclaim our heritages. Oh, look at here. I found a little fun fact. So, do you remember anything about the blanket tradition? It says, what is the indigenous blanket tradition? Right? And it says the First Nations people, a blanket holds deep meaning and traditions linked to culture, birth, life, and, uh, you know, unaliving. It can represent survival and beliefs that transcend time and place. Blankets also have a dark history as they were sometimes used to decimate, okay, uh, populations. And do know that this is so, so true. I will tell you personally, blankets are very important in my family. My mom has several. I have several, and several is, putting it lightly. Everything from, Afghans to quilts to you name it, we keep a blanket, okay? So do know we even had a project with our family union that we host every year where everybody had their own little square that they had to decorate and it had to be put into the quilt, and we have this huge blanket with everybody's names of their families, and it's a beautiful tradition. So but I'm not going to read the rest, you know what I'm saying? I want you to read that in its entirety, okay? Please read the bottom in its entirety, and you'll understand why as we go forward. I just mentioned smallpox. So again, I'm pulling a little excerpt from Curimio, and I'm going to play it right now.
Planter, all right? Down here it says role of Captain David Bell's company. The role gave the enlistment date, place, age, size, trade, country, and description. So it begins with Thomas as Thomas Ferguson. He's from Williamsburg. He's a soldier. He's Scottish. And he's brown with dark brown hair. He's brown with dark brown hair and pitted with smallpox. Smallpox. Who got smallpox?
So let's take a gander. We're going to look at some more descriptors. I do want you to pay attention to the first name, John Peter, up here, because you see he is also described with pitted with smallpox. So, and you see where he's from? He's from the Albemarle region. All right. And let me play the video.
Peter. He's a weird. He's English. He's dark with black hair. All right. Robert Bassett. He's English. He's dark with swarthy black hair. Francis Ryan. He's a butcher. He's Irish. He's dark and swarthy with black hair. He's dark and swarthy. I mean, how else are you gonna? What are you gonna conclude with this, guys? Tell me. Be straight up with me. All right. Because Francis Ryan, he's Irish, and he's dark and swarthy with black hair. So where's the red hair? Where's the blue eyes? Where's the fair skin? The red hair? Where's all that? All right, he's Irish. Also, you thought all Irish look like that, huh? Charles Scott, Carpenter, Virginia. He's dark and swarthy with black hair and slim made. David Hartwell, Carpenter, Virginia, dark and swarthy. Dark and swarthy. Jacob Morris, he's from Virginia, dark and swarthy. Edward Land. Now remember, these are all people of dark complexion, so-called Negro people, right? So-called black people, right? Now, are any of these people that are from the States being labeled slaves? Right? They're planters, carpenters, shoemakers, whatever, they're not slaves. So these are free people of color, right? These will be considered free people of color. Jacob Morris, he's from Virginia, dark and swarthy. He's slim. Edward Land, Virginia, dark with dark brown hair. Aaron Sweeney, he's from Virginia, dark with dark brown hair. Joseph Howard, he's a soldier, English, dark and swarthy. Flat nose. A flat nose, dark and swarthy. William Holland, he's from Virginia, he's dark and swarthy. John DeNoche, gardener, Irish, he's fair with light colored hair. All right, very descriptive, right? John DeNoche is actually fair. Daniel McFain, he's a planner, he's Scottish, he's fair too with light colored hair. All right, we got so-called white people here, maybe. All right, Whitnell Warner, schoolmaster, Irish, he's fair with light colored hair. Robert Jeets, he's English, he's fair with light colored hair. All right, and so on. So it's
So I wanted to show you something. I wanted to show you a ancestor which shares the same surname as the Sykes family. And I wanted to show you that this here is Jeremiah Jerry Sykes. And these gentlemen surrounding him are part of the 3rd Regiment in Massachusetts, which is known as the Old Guard. He was actually an honorary member of the Old Guard. Okay, but I just wanted to really take a gander at this visual. I do think there's another gentleman, person of color, perhaps behind, let's see, first row, third man in, if you're counting from the left, right behind him, but you can't really see his face too well. Uh, but we'll get into it. Just, I'm going to give you a visual. And as you see, the ancestor, Jeremiah, he looks very, proud to be there. You're right. He's looking at the camera. He doesn't look like he's under any duress. He does, he's looking sharp. Oh. Oh man, I threw this in to make myself laugh because again, when you're doing genealogy, right? You have to lighten up. You have to because it's a lot of heavy things that you deal with. So my bad, y'all. I'll be doing too much. Okay, back to uh Jeremiah, um, Jerry Sykes. He says he was born into slavery. And anytime, we have to get our mind together and understand something. The Sykes family uh, was definitely free people of color. Jeremiah Jerry Sykes being born into slavery near Washington, North Carolina on November 11th, 1848. He was the son of Hester Ann and John Sykes, and they say little is known about his parents except that they were enslaved in North Carolina and that they, like their son, were born into slavery. Um, there's still some work to do in regards to that because there's indentured servitude contracts throughout North Carolina. And also, I'm not going to say that slavery did not exist because it did, but I happen to know that it is the Indians that were already here. They were the first to be enslaved, or to be in these indentured contracts and what have you, either or and. Okay. Um, so they said there were several enslavers with the surname Sykes and Sykes in eastern North Carolina at the time of the 1850 and 1860 censuses. Unfortunately, it says enslaved people were not listed by name in census records until after the Civil War, making it difficult to discern where exactly and where's the family enslaved. Now, I do believe with digging you can find that stuff out. And I'm going to be doing some more digging, of course, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention. So it says just before the outbreak of the Civil War, at the age of 11 or 12, Sykes and other enslaved children were transported to Roanoke Island to build up its defenses. Later in life, Sykes would tell the Fairhaven Star that he was tasked with wheelbarrowing large blocks of stone and other substances to repair the fort on the island. The work was difficult, Sykes said, and he saw many fall exhausted in their tracks, unable to proceed further. He says the Confederacy's brutal use of the labor of enslaved people at Roanoke Island would come back to haunt it during the Battle of Roanoke Island, February 7th and 8th, 1862, when escaped local enslaved people gave the Union Army critical information about their enemy's strength and defenses. With this information, the Union Army captured the island in only 2 days with modest casualties. So then it goes on to talk about Captain John A. Halls and the Massachusetts 3rd Infantry Regiment, which is also known as the Old Guard. Following the victory of the Union Army at Roanoke Island, Sykes was briefly classified by the Union as contraband of war. That is, captured enemy property until President Lincoln signed the Second Confiscation Act into law on July 17, 1862, which changed the legal status of escaped enslaved people in territory occupied by the Union armies of captives of war, forever free of their servitude and not again held as slaves. Now, during this time, Sykes found work as a cook for the Massachusetts 3rd Regiment, then encamped outside the city of New Bern, North Carolina. In the course of his work at New Bern, the young Sykes drew the attention of Captain John A. Halls of Fairhaven, who commanded Company E of the 3rd Regiment. Halls hired Sykes as his personal servant, and in this capacity Sykes remained with Company E for the remainder of his deployment, serving Halls at the battles of Whitehall and Kingston. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't think that he just became this man's servant and then decided that he was just going to uh, moved to Fairhaven, Massachusetts with them, and then that he was going to continuously go to all the reunions of this regiment and things like that. They even made him an honorary member. Many a times, this old guard, you know what I'm saying? Many a times, these folks that are melanated served, and if they don't want, they get rid of the records or what have you, because they do not want that being known now. So I personally, I don't think he just, was the cook and decided, oh, I'm going to hang around you guys forever and become a groupie of this troop. I think he actually was part of the troop, and we'll see. I'm going to work on this a lot more going further, but I just wanted to share this with you, and I think it's interesting. Oh, here's another interesting cat. This one here is William Sykes, right? Former slave, Martin County, and it's just saying African American history. However, I beg to differ. Now, William Sykes here is age 78, and I believe when he did his slave narrative, he was, he was incarcerated. So William, he was interviewed while in state prison at the age of 78 years old. He tells that he and his mother Martha belonged to Joshua and Catherine Long of Martin County, and his father Henry belonged to Squire Ben Sykes of Tyrrell County. I mean Terrell. It seems that Squire Sykes lived in Gumneck and owned more than 100 slaves. William had several siblings. Now get this. One's named after Henry's father, and then he has a Benjamin, Columbus, and then there's Hester, right? Margaret, Lucy, Susan. So I just want people to, I'm going to do my research on this about this Squire Ben Sykes. And as you see with the other Sykes, his mother's name was Hester Ann. This gentleman's name's Hester. Uh, I mean, this gentleman's child's name's Hester. They're probably part of the same family unit, right, and cluster and everything like that. But something's a little odd about this, and I do want people to know that the Sephardic Jews and Moors and things of that nature, they did have dough, and many were associated with some of these plantations and things of that nature. So, we got to look past what we were taught, and we have to really get to the nitty gritty, roll our sleeves up, and figure some things out. But I'm just bringing a couple cases that are a little suspect to me, and I'm going to be looking into it further. But, I'm just bringing the initial incidences out to you because it's interesting. Okay, now we have a Nancy Bowser. Nancy Bowser Jones Eggleston says was African American, and again, I haven't found any African yet, but if I do, I'll do a video on it. Her heritage and community involved are highlighted by several key factors from her life. Now, as you see, she would be white passing. Um, However, she definitely claimed, her melanation, right? They say that she's a African American pioneer. Again, I'm not comfortable with the African. However, I fall under this very same nameplate to this day to some people in this country. So, she was recognized as one of the first African American florists in eastern North Carolina, operating a business with her husband for nearly 20 years. Now, the reason why I pulled her obituary up is because there's an ancestry notation here, and it says it's right here, ancestry notation. It says she was the matriarch of the Bowser family with roots tracing back to Anthony Bowser in 1650, who arrived in America from England in the late 17th century. Now, if you go to House of Names always likes to, show the migration from England to America and things like. You will not find this man on that site, and that's only because, and in my opinion, it's only because she ousted him as, you know what I'm saying, being her ancestor and being able to prove it. You feel me? And because if you go to House of Names for anybody else or whatever the case may be in this area where we're from, which is Terrell County and things like that, you will find their information out there. So again, it's speculation, but I'm looking into it. It's a lot of, it's a lot of unanswered questions, but worthy of mention. So I want to talk about, I'm saying, identity compression. And, we talked about that quite a bit. And that's when they sit up there and, they put this wonderful history we have, whether, I'm saying, you're from, if you're Welsh or whatever the case may be, or Indian or whatever, and they just put you under a label and boom, it all goes away, right? And that doesn't matter if you are black or white. That's what happens when you are an American citizen and you have to check white, black, other, whatever, right? So, cultural and historical damage, erasure of truth, loss of continuity, and distorted archives. Those are some run ins. Those are the things that, we have to get right. Like, we can make this right if we reclaim it, but people are going to have to roll up their sleeves and want to do this for themselves. Okay? Oh, look at the different shades, right? The different complexions. And you saw how we had the white passing ancestor, and, we saw the swarthy William Sykes and everything in between. So let's take a gander here. It says legal and census descriptors. So from the 1700s to the 1900s, again, I want to emphasize these were not ancestry labels, they were racial control categories. Common labels applied to Albemarle indigenous families: mulatto, colored, free person of color, other free, non-white, mixed, right? And not white, okay? Free Negro, even when no African ancestry existed. These labels were used to erase indigenous identity, prevent land claims, prevent tribal continuity, and collapse multiple ancestries into one racial category. And my ancestors, more than likely your ancestors, they was caught up in that system. No doubt. So my family was described as tawny, brown, olive, ruddy, swarthy, light brown, high colored, mulatto, colored, free people of color, native stock, Indian looking, brown people of the sound. They were never described as African, Negro, black, white, European only. Oh, and throw dark and yeller in there because I seen those on documents. Um, we were indigenous people forced into racial categories that erased us. So this claim's not new. It's a product of US federal policy and it's not indigenous truth. Okay, so when some Western Plains individuals say they are repeating, oh, I'm sorry. When some Western Plains individuals say, you know, show your papers or, you don't have history, you don't have a culture, all these things. They're just repeating a federal narrative. It's not a historical one. This idea comes from federal recognition rules, reservation based identity systems, the BIA enrollment criteria, treaty based definitions, and again, Hollywood imagery, right? Census racial categories. So again, when they say that you're not Indian and they are, listen, um, that's what it's about. It's about, staying and sticking to the story. That's what it's about. And that's why it's imperative for us to do our genealogy, find what we find and share it. Okay? We got to share it. So let's look at some immigration narratives that targeted Southern and Eastern Europeans. Right? Before becoming president, Wilson wrote that the new immigrants were of an altered stock that caused uneasiness. These new immigrants. Meaning what? Italians, Greeks, Slavs, Jews, Iberians, and Balkan peoples, perhaps? Wilson described new European immigrants as an alteration of stock, causing uneasiness. So, what did this rhetoric do? It delegitimized Mediterranean and Iberian Europeans. It framed them as racially suspect. It pushed them closer to colored status in public perception, and it reinforced the idea that only Northern Europeans were true Americans. This is the exact compression of your complexion descriptor arguments, right? Because we just finished arguing about that. Like, so we know that all these different labels, all these different colors, or whatever they're doing, but that's what they did, and we're still under many labels today. So it didn't really change much. So it says, why Bowser and Liverman fit this category. And just so you know what category, well, they would be considered some of the Atlantic trade routes used by the Sephardic families. They would be considered like the Sephardic, part of the Portuguese diaspora. Um, and it's documented. I do have information in regards to that. So, and this is what I want you to know. Like, if you do your genealogy, you'll find a lot of things out that would surprise you because they only give you that classification, which takes away so much of your history. Oh, yes. This is a fun fact. So let's just go over to the right real quick. I want to talk about the reinforcement of Jim Crow as national policy. So it says Wilson's presidency is described as the lowest point of American race relations in the early 20th century. Now, even if it's described as the lowest point of American race relations, right, he was able to do unsurmountable damage that is still not being undone to this very day. Okay, because just look up Woodrow Wilson. All right, and I think he's the president responsible for playing Birth of the Nation in there, which sparked all those uh, riots all over the place, and it was a lot of unalivings. So again, it says his presidency marked unprecedented regression in racial equality, meaning, people were already in office in the White House and things like that, melanated people, and they got fired. Right? It was a lot of discrimination and just setting us back. Um, So this national climate says hardened racial categories. It erased indigenous identity by forcing families into black, mulatto, or colored labels. It delegitimized mixed ancestry communities, and it reinforced the idea that the only Anglo-Saxon whiteness was legitimate. Now, mind you, I have ancestors that are Anglo-Saxon, and they're not, of the pale complexion. So, it's a double compression because not only did they erase the indigenous side, they also erased the colonizer or the um, the European side, right? Um, or the settler, right? Because I don't want to say colonizer, settler. I mean, it's both, either way. Um, and both of them was forced into racial categories. So I just want to give you a sample from it. It's an excerpt from The Conquest of a Continent and the Expansion of Races in America by Grant Madison, um, or Madison Grant. I want you to know that this book, I'm not referring you to this book. It does have that overtone, but I just want to give you an idea that they all, they knew who we were. And it's in many books and texts, but you can also see the movement. And from the tone of what I'm about to read to you, you'll get a gist of why I'm putting this clip in here. So it says, the revolt against European control, especially in the Orient. See, now just that right there. I'm not even going to finish that whole sentence out. The revolt against European control. What European control? Whom's European control? Because Europeans were pale and they were dark skinned. You get what I'm saying? So, they say it's not about race, but if you truly do your due diligence and look into history, it was all about race. But let's now let me read this. The revolt against European control, especially in the Orient, is becoming more and more pronounced. As said above, it has been encouraged unintentionally by the missionaries, who, in educating the natives, succeed only in arousing them to assert their equality with the European races. Probably the greatest tragedy in the world today is the corrosive jealousy of the fair skin of the white races felt by those whose skin is black, yellow, or brown. The world will hear more of this as the revolt of the lower races spreads. There you go. One of the manifestations of this jealousy of the fair skin of the Nordics is shown in those numerous counts where members of the colored races or even dark-skinned members of the Nordic race regard the possession of a blonde woman as an assertion and proof of race equality. This has been true historically since the earliest times. It is more than ever in evidence at present day. So, you see that tone? You see what he's saying? Comprehension is key, people. Comprehension is key. So, just to give you an more idea of the mixture within my ancestry, right? Here's some other surnames, which is Johnson. Johnson in Terrell County, at least the Johnsons that I'm affiliated with and related to. Uh, they are known to have a mixture in, right, with the indigenous folks there. It does say that their name is English, son of John. You feel me? But they definitely have records of being Tuscarora. Liverman, they have records of being Tuscarora and Sokotan. And the Livermans and Lieberman, right? English surname with Iberian coastal ties. So, Lieberman is more than likely the Sephardic, right? The Sephardic Jew. Documented in Portuguese coastal diaspora migrations, appears in Atlantic maritime trade routes, and linked to Portuguese coastal communities. Now, MacLeese, and I know there's a shout out to the MacLeeses. It's Gaelic, Scottish, and Ulster Scots, right? And they are known to be Tuscarora too due to intermarriage with Albemarle uh, people. And it says in 1790, and I'm going to read this clip, right? Because this is from that same book that I read from before. And it says in 1790, these Ulster Scots in the colonies numbered about 200,000, and the pure, you see that word? That's why I don't like to use pure. And the pure Scots about 300,000, and taken together they were, next to the English, the most important element. They were, as said above, preeminently pioneers and Indian. Do you see that? Preeminently pioneers and Indian fighters, and the same fact appears in the history of practically every frontier of British colonies during the next century. They were a highly selected group when they first went to Ireland, which was at the time, to all intents, a frontier. Since that time, the Scots and the Ulster Scots have everywhere shown the characteristics of the ideal pioneer. They played a predominant part in the settlement of the southern part of the Midwest. All right, so this is the same book, but I just wanted you to see because sometimes you get the good with the bad, you get the truth with the lies. You're just gonna have to use your discernment. Got to use your discernment. So shout out to the Johnsons, Livermans, and McLeeses. So I just want to also touch base, right, on the emotional and the psychological damage, right? The identity confusion. And again, for many of us, if you have oral history and tradition, you knew about these things, but you maybe couldn't prove it before. That's why it's imperative to do your genealogy because it's out here now. There's information accessible to us now. An internalized stigma. This is something that, you know, I think can be dealt with if you know who you are, right? If you take the time out, don't let people tell you who you are. Don't let them tell you who you are anymore. And it's funny because when you know who you are and you do your research and you dig into it more, the grief and anger they come in. Uh, but eventually, right? Eventually, you get past that. You heal past that. And some of the ways of doing so, I like to say, is I like to look at Uncle Sam as a person, right? And if I contribute to Uncle Sam to a person, then I know that I'm dealing with something a little different. I might be dealing with a narcissistic, sociopath, psychopath, or some shit. No, I'm just let me stop. I asked AI, how would it feel if I if oh, how would you feel if you were classified African American and have no African ancestry? And AI, and again, I know they don't have feelings, but they try their best to emulate humanity. And they said frustrated, robbed, resilient yet weary, and determined. And believe it or not, I can relate to those because I am determined and I'm weary. And I do feel like I've been robbed and I am quite frustrated. So I ain't even mad at the AI for real. So I just want to make this known. My presence in America predates European arrival. My indigenous ancestors lived in the Albemarle region long before surnames or colonial records even existed. You feel me? So I am very happy that I am on this journey. I will continue this journey. And please, 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 do your research and figure it out too. You will not be disappointed. So, my full unbiased heritage list, without erasure, without racial compression, and without the biases that harmed my family. Indigenous Albemarle, the tribes are listed. Sephardic Iberian, right? Celtic Druid, Anglo Norman, Scottish, and Norse. And guess what? This is the heritage that I'm reclaiming, whole, undiluted, and fully affirmed. Thank you. If you've been here through the whole video, I appreciate you. Please like, share, and subscribe. And you'll see it at the bottom of the screen.